Waterways in general have self-purifying properties which are capable of dealing with sewage pumped into them. But these can become overloaded, particularly in docks and landlocked waters and in busy coastal waters. When this happens, the waters can become a health hazard, can produce obnoxious and dangerous gases, and the water can become discolored and unsightly. The Intergovernmental Maritime Consultative Organization, or IMCO, have proposed regulations for the prevention of pollution by sewage from ships, which were adopted by 67 nations in 1973. It is therefore increasingly necessary for all ships to have some system of sewage treatment harmless to the waters in which they float. If anaerobic conditions arise, which will happen if there is a lack of oxygen, the sewage can become septic, toxic, and dangerous. Sewage treatment generally operates under aerobic conditions, where a surplus of oxygen supports bacteria to digest the sewage, giving off harmless carbon dioxide. The simplest system is holding tanks, from which there is no discharge overboard in restricted waters. Such tanks retain collected waste and flush water until discharge ashore or in unrestricted waters is possible. There must be an aeration connection so that air can be bubbled through the waste, as otherwise septic or anaerobic conditions will arise, resulting in toxic, corrosive and inflammable gases being formed, and the waste could solidify. A vent from the top of the holding tanks must be fitted, together with an ullage opening, so that the level of the content may be ascertained. A flushing connection and discharge pipe is fitted for use when discharge is permissible. Clearly, the great disadvantage of such a system is the capacity required in the holding tanks, particularly if there are likely to be long periods between occasions when sewage can be discharged ashore or in unrestricted waters. A system which reduces the required capacity of holding tanks by about 98% is known as the chemical recirculating system. The toilets are flushed with a liquid which contains alkaline sterilizing chemical antiseptics, so chemical action starts at once. The sewage is passed to a chemical dissolving basket, where a chemical is added to remove color and odor and help settling of solids by flocculation. It is then passed to a macerator which grinds up all solid material. After this it is passed to a chemical treatment tank where another chemical is added which liquefies organic matter and sterilizes the fluid. Some part of this liquid is recirculated through the 3 stages, ensuring good maceration and mixing. From here, the liquid passes to a settling tank, in which all solid matter settles and is transferred at intervals to a holding tank. In some systems, most of the solid matter is separated and conveyed to the holding tank at an earlier stage by means of a moving belt, but a settling tank is still retained for any residual solids. From the settling tank, sterilized fluid passes through a filter and is pumped by the sanitary pump to a pressure tank, into which compressed air is admitted to keep the fluid under pressure. The fluid in the pressure tank is used for flushing the toilets in the ship, so that when in restricted waters, no additional water is obtained from the sea, and the holding tanks can be comparatively small, about 2 litres per man per day. In unrestricted waters, the whole system can be shut down and seawater used for flushing toilets, the sewage being directed back to the sea. The holding tanks can also be flushed out, but the plant should be left containing flushing fluid to minimize corrosion. Yet another method is the biological system, the system that's universally used for treatment of municipal waste. On ships, seawater is used and the effluent disposed of overboard. This effluent is harmless and meets IMCO requirements. Certain microorganisms make use of human waste as food material. Organisms which do so in the absence of oxygen produce toxic, corrosive and inflammable gases and are not used at sea. But others digest waste only in the presence of oxygen and produce no dangerous gases, mostly carbon dioxide. One such system is known as the trickle filter. Certain aggregate materials are capable of holding large communities of such microorganisms, and the wastes are allowed to trickle through these aggregates, as here ashore. In plants designed for shipboard use, small pieces of plastic are used instead of aggregate. This is a diagram of a typical system. Sewage from the toilets enters the filter tank and sinks through the trickle filter. Compressed air is bubbled from a pipe about the middle of the filter and causes an airlift, so that the sewage is returned to above the filter and sinks through it again, resulting in a continuous circulation. The air passing through the filter dissolves in the sewage and results in a multiplication of the bacteria. These digest the sewage and give off unobjectionable gases, mostly carbon dioxide. This and any undissolved air are vented at the top. Sludge collects in the filter and falls off to the bottom of the tank from time to time. When the level of the liquor gets high enough, clear effluent spills over into this pipe. The pipe is placed centrally so that the spillover is unaffected by the pitch and roll of the ship. The clear effluent is chlorinated and passed to a tank which provides time for the chlorine to disinfect the effluent. A float switch is provided in this tank, and when the effluent reaches a certain level, the discharge pump is started for discharge overboard. Periodic desludging of the filter tank can be carried out in unrestricted waters. To do so, this air valve is opened, as is the valve on the desludging pipe, and the valve from the contact tank is closed. This causes the air to bubble through the length of the filter tank and the disturbed sludge to be drained through the discharge pump overboard. Another system using microorganisms is known as the extended aeration process. In this there are three separate compartments: an aeration compartment, a settling compartment, and a chlorine contact compartment. The incoming sewage is held in the aeration compartment for approximately 24 hours. Here it is digested by the microorganisms and the emitted carbon dioxide is vented. Air is supplied to the sewage through a number of fine bubble diffusers located at the bottom of the tank. This is such a diffuser. This provides oxygen for the microorganisms and also keeps the contents of the tank intimately mixed with the raw sewage and returned activated sludge. The water with bacteria cells is displaced into the settling compartment. Here the bacteria settle out and are returned by means of an airlift tube to the aeration compartment. The settling compartment is of the hopper type, the sloping sides preventing the settled sludge from accumulating and directing it to the suction side of the airlift. The effluent from the aeration compartment enters the settling compartment through a coarse screen. The activated sludge, having settled out, clear effluent is discharged via a weir at the top. A surface skimmer is provided to skim off the surface debris and return it to the aeration compartment. The clear effluent from the settling compartment passes through a chlorinator and is stored in the contact tank to allow time for the chlorine to kill off any harmful bacteria. Waste water from baths, etc. can also be admitted to this tank. Two levels of float switches are provided, so that when the liquor reaches the upper one, the discharge pump is started to discharge overboard, and when the liquor drops to the lower one, the pump is switched off. A third float switch, higher than the other two, is fitted to sound an alarm should the liquor rise above the normal high-level position. An emergency overflow is also fitted at this level. This is a typical extended aeration plant. The raw sewage enters here directly into the aeration compartment. It will normally have been macerated before entry. There are two air compressors which are fitted with filters to ensure clean air. One is on duty while the other acts as standby. They are changed over from time to time. The compressed air is piped to the bottom of the aeration compartment where it bubbles through diffusers similar to this one. The air enters down this pipe and bubbles out through these 6 ceramic elements. Elements can easily be removed and replaced from time to time. The compressed air also provides the air lift to recirculate the sludge from the settling compartment. The sludge passes along a transparent tube above the tank so that a visual check may be made that the recirculation is taking place properly. This is a diagram showing the inside of the equipment. In order to make the plant as compact as possible, the aeration compartment surrounds the settling compartment. The sewage flows slowly round this U-shaped compartment and passes through this coarse screen before entering the lower part of the settling compartment. Activated sludge from the bottom of the settling compartment passes up this pipe. This small pipe contains the compressed air which provides the airlift. The sludge is thus returned via a section of transparent pipe to the aeration compartment. Surface debris in the settling compartment is collected by the skimmer and is also returned to the aeration compartment. This pipe from the centre of the skimmer carries clear effluent from underneath the skimmer via a weir to the chlorinator. The chlorinator contains two tubes containing chlorination tablets. These tubes have holes in the lower ends to allow the effluent to enter and come out again. From the chlorinator, the effluent passes to the contact tank, into which may also be directed water from baths, laundry, etc., through this pipe. When starting up the equipment, and thereafter at least once a week in restricted waters, make sure there are sufficient tablets in the chlorinator. Never allow the level of tablets to fall below a quarter full. Stow and handle all chemicals for sewage treatment strictly in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions. Never allow chemicals to become damp or contaminated with oil. They may be corrosive to the skin, spontaneously flammable, or even explosive. They should always be stored in their original containers in a cool, dry place. Then check that the valve from the air compressor is open and switch on one of the two air compressors from the control panel. Check that the pressure gauge is reading between 0.34 and 0.54 bars. Check that the activated sludge is being returned to the aeration compartment by inspecting the transparent pipe on top of the tank. At least once a week, the residual chlorine content of the effluent should be checked by taking a sample from the sampling valve. The sample can then be tested with the test kit provided. If the chlorine residue is above 5 parts per million, as the dark colour here indicates, use only one tablet tube instead of two in the chlorinator. Once a month, change over from duty to standby air compressor. Ensure that the delivery valve of the standby compressor is open before operating the changeover switch. Close the delivery valve on the unit not running. Check the contents of the aeration compartment for quantity of suspended solids, filling a graduated cylinder from the sampling valve to the 100 milliliter level. Allow the contents of the cylinder to settle for 30 minutes. If the level of the sludge is above the 60 milliliter level, the unit must be partially desludged. To partially desludge, which should normally be done every 2 or 3 months and in unrestricted waters, shut down the unit for half an hour and allow to stand. Now close the contact tank drain valve and open the settler drain valve. Switch on the discharge pump. This will drain the sludge from the settler tank and from the aeration tank through the settler. When the aeration tank is about 25% full, the pump will lose suction and should be stopped. The cover in the top of the aeration compartment is removed to check the screen is clean. The cover of the settler compartment is also removed to check that the interior is clean. If it is not, it should be hosed down with clean water. Every 6 months, the filter elements on the air compressor should be checked and replaced if necessary. The non-return valves in the air compressor's discharge should also be checked. Every 12 months, all compartments should be drained and cleaned. This should be done when the ship is in unrestricted waters for a long period, or when in dock where there are facilities for discharging ashore. To do this, the sewage and wastewater inlet valve should be closed and the contents of the contact tank pumped overboard. Then the discharge pump is switched off. The drain valve of the contact tank should now be closed, and also that of the settler compartment, if it is not so already. The drain valve of the aeration compartment should now be opened. Now the discharge pump is turned to hand and the pump switched on. This will result in the aeration tank being completely drained and all its sludge removed. When it is empty, its drain valve is closed and the drain valve of the settler is opened. This will drain the settler in the same way. Now the drain valve of the settler is closed and the pump switched off, and the valves either side of the pump are closed. The whole unit will now be empty. The inspection cover should now be removed and the interior inspected. Recoat any damaged areas with high-grade coal tar epoxy if necessary. It should be mentioned that nothing should ever be welded to the exterior of the unit, as this will destroy the internal coatings. Also, the cover joints should be inspected and renewed as necessary. When all this has been done, the unit is refilled by opening the drain valve of the aeration compartment and also the refilling valve. When the unit is again full, the aeration compartment drain valve and refilling valve are closed. The sewage and wastewater inlet valves, the contact tank drain valve, and the valves on either side of the discharge pump are all opened. The air compressor is switched on and the discharge pump is switched to automatic. The unit is now once more in operation, but it will take some 10 days to a fortnight for new colonies of microorganisms to form, during which time partially untreated sewage will be discharged. Full desludging should therefore only be carried out when the ship is in unrestricted waters for an extended period. Partial desludging can be done in unrestricted waters every 2 or 3 months. If, however, the ship is equipped with an incinerator, limited quantities of sludge can be incinerated daily. In this type of incinerator, solid waste is loaded generally in plastic sacks. An auxiliary burner is lighted to ignite the waste. A forced draft is provided. After a while, the auxiliary burner is extinguished automatically, and the waste will continue to burn on its own. An average day's waste for a crew of 30 or 40 can be incinerated in about 30 minutes. By now, the incinerator is hot enough to burn the liquid waste, both oil sludge and sewage sludge. Since sewage sludge is about 98% or 99% water, only a limited quantity can be disposed of daily, unless fuel is wasted by continuing to use the auxiliary burner. A desludging valve on the sewage unit allows the sludge to be pumped to the incinerator sludge tank. This is connected to a separate burner on the incinerator. When all the waste has been burnt and the incinerator has cooled down, the ash and non-combustible material is simply removed from the combustion chamber by pulling out the ash slide. The rotating arm will scrape all the residue into the ash box. When in unrestricted waters, ships fitted with holding tanks or chemical treatment plants should discharge all sewage and accumulated waste overboard. Holding tanks, sludge tanks and sewage plants may then be flushed out. Biological plants, however, should not be shut down, though the effluent need not be chlorinated. If such plants were shut down, the colonies of bacteria would become inactive, and it would take 2 to 3 days to reach full efficiency. Before entering restricted waters, check that the plant is fully supplied with flocculating and disinfecting chemicals as required. Ships with biological treatment plants should have the chlorine tablet tubes replaced in the chlorinator. In the case of ships with holding tanks or chemical plants, sewage is now directed into these plants. In ships with biological plants, the sewage will of course already be entering them. When in port, plants must be kept in operation. The overboard discharge should be tested for residual chlorine and the chemical stock checked. Ships fitted with such equipment, properly maintained and used according to the maker's instructions, will discharge effluent that meets all countries' regulations. So study carefully the operator's manual for the sewage treatment equipment on your ship. Such will be ships that pass in the night and leave no trace.